Good afternoon and welcome back to the 21st Annual CERIAS Security Seminar, a Symposium. Our next speaker is Ms. Jamila Hunter. Jamila is the Director of Product Development at Mastercard, and her talk will be on biometrics, the new norm in payments. I need to share that we had a great opportunity this last year for CERIAS and our biometrics, International Biometric Standards and Testing Laboratory to work hand in hand in Mastercard to author a publication that they helped us promote. So it's our pleasure to have them come and talk about some of the initiatives and the goal and the impact of biometrics in the payment systems. Jamila, welcome.
All right, thank you so much. Hopefully you can hear me well.
Loud and clear, great.
All right, great, thank you. So thank you all, and it is a pleasure to be here and to take you through our views on the evolving and expanding of the digital ecosystem we all live in today. We're preserving trust with consumers while incorporating security by design is the key. We want to make sure that we can ensure the future of the digital world. This is not easy to do, so especially when we are in such a pace of change and it's extreme as it is today. But at Mastercard, we are constantly thinking about this 24/7, and we have solutions that will help for the here and now, also setting the stage for the future. So we'll begin. So from a Mastercard standpoint, wanted to get a little bit of background on kind of where we've been and where we are. We are no longer part of this finite four-party model, but rather an exploded ecosystem with finite points, channels, and devices, leading to a much larger expanded threat surface for vulnerability. We have to evolve with our ecosystem. Prior to 2012, the payment ecosystem was largely comprised of issuers, acquirers, merchants, and consumers, making up that four-party model. Now, network connections between stakeholders were clearly defined and protected, and this was done according to industry standards and protocols. Physical acceptance, although was the key driver, was the primary driver, we knew that this digital explosion was going to start. Now, there was still fraud, and the risk of potential widespread, large-scale fraud and cyber attacks were limited, but fraud protections were put in place for each stakeholder to help detect the various types of fraud that occurred within the scope of their defined network connections. Mastercard helped to supplement fraud protections for issuers, acquirers, and merchants with fraud rules and neural network-based models. As we extended into roughly 2016, there was a massive growth in the number of digital merchants and third-party providers entering the ecosystem, increasing the number of undefined connections between stakeholders, which led to a more seamless and omni-channel experience for consumers. Consumers were now interacting and transacting from multiple devices, which also increased the threat surface, leading to increasing points of vulnerability, again, to perpetuate attacks at a larger scale. What Mastercard did in response to that in 2014 is that we developed a product called SafetyNet. It was in response to a growing market and regulatory demand for payment ecosystem protection. Now, leveraging an unparalleled global network visibility and transaction insights, SafetyNet provides real-time, network-level fraud monitoring for issuers, complementing their existing fraud detection solutions as a second line of defense against these large-scale fraud attacks. It was then in 2016 that we also started the journey of revamping the Mastercard Authentication Network, beginning the work to eliminate authentication methods like static passwords and creating authentications for this digital world. So where are we today? The currently evolving ecosystem makes for even more seamless and connected experiences, including connected homes, cars, even washers, right? All to enhance consumer convenience. But the Internet of Things has also led the greater complexity in payments, creating infinitely more undefined and often inadequately protected connections. This opens up the possibility of exploiting the weak links in new IoT devices, applications, and providers that neglect to utilize stringent network, regulatory, and security standards and the protocols. In this backdrop, establishing trust and continually investing in the network while closely working with our partners and consumers is key to ensuring that we can deliver the experience that consumers demand in a secure and private ecosystem. All right. So as the consumer and business experience expands to more of these touch points, the exposure of information increases significantly. Consumer interactions with retail or bill payments, even the person-to-person or the P2P payment services, when we look at connected homes, with internet devices that help manage our daily lives, or even social media, as it continues to evolve in its ability to market to us while using our credentials for access to other services. Businesses are also impacted and are seeing an increase, largely led by the usage of mobile applications and digital wallets. As these interaction and points of digital contact increase, all of our experiences are coming together into a holistic digital continuum, the unified or one experience. We can no longer isolate security to just payments. We must ensure trust across every experience for consumers and business. So what do we expect by now? If we went back 15, 20, even 25 years, holistically, most expected that we would be close to creating a secure, popular, and trusted privacy rights infrastructure that allows for business innovation and monetization while also offering individual choices for protecting their personal information in easy-to-use formats. Even movies in the late 90s and early 2000s demonstrated a high technical environment full of smart devices, artificial intelligence, and the use of biometrics to identify consumers and make payments. The strong considerations that have influenced our growth are centered around security, convenience, and privacy, with a focus on security in the cyber realm, bringing order and education where none existed, developing a suite of capabilities to all ecosystem stakeholders, ensuring optimal cyber health, all while protecting the confidentiality of the consumer authentication data. So now that we're here, what are the payment considerations that influence security? Looking back over the past 25 years, the acts of making payments has evolved, and we started out primarily using cash, even writing checks, to exchanging money electronically in many different ways. Credit card payments have gone from a manual entry of card details for each transaction to one-click purchasing, and now to automatic payments. Think about the last time you completed a ride with Uber or Lyft. You just got out the car. Or the last time you completed a food delivery, you placed the order, it arrived, and your credit card payment was done for you. For different concerns, but for the same reason, businesses have been known to post messages to their customers requesting that they pay with credit. The reason may vary due to crime or to clean forms of payment, but businesses would rather process more credit card payments than have cash on hand. For the other considerations, there are two schools of thought regarding consumer expectation and perception: those who prefer convenience and those who prefer privacy. Although public norms will continue to trend toward the desire for more privacy, people's actions will trend towards giving up more and more control of their data for this convenience. Ultimately, we have to expand security beyond transactions to cyber environments, enhance security in the consumer digital transaction journey, and extend security to other types of transactions beyond cards. Now, there's a right balance between privacy, security, and convenience that we just mentioned. This balance will need to be negotiated constantly. So let's take a little bit of a closer look. The primary goal of security is to protect both payers and payees from new and emerging threats to the ecosystem. Building security in the cybersphere to encourage greater consumer trust in payments and beyond. Now, our challenge, we have to evolve with our ecosystem. We no longer are part of, again, that finite four-party model, but rather an exploding ecosystem with infinite points of vulnerability. So stat time, right? There's over 2.5 quintillion bytes of data generated per day by humans and their devices, of which 90% are from the last 2 years. 2.5 billion websites are being interacted with each day. And $1 is the average cost for a fraudster to begin hacking and stealing data. There's $5 trillion worth of cyber breach as a problem. And this is one of the biggest threats to consumer trust. The solution, we have to secure the ecosystem. Safety Net is another product that sees more than 140 attacks of all different types every day and has declined over 7.3 billion in fraudulent authorization attempts year to date, with 64 million transactions blocked. Another product, Threat Scan, provides the robotics to constantly auto-test our network and has identified over 1,100 vulnerabilities for more than 100 of our customers to date. The second step is that we need to protect the cyber environments. The 5 biggest threats to bank cybersecurity include unprotected data, malware, non-secure third-party services, manipulated data, and spoofing. If we define the standards, currently we're setting standards that will be the basis for ensuring cyber trust across our franchise and collecting with our partners and customers to share information and ideas. This collaboration across industry will help to build our future vision and to build a cyber ecosystem that evolves with and beyond digital payments. In today's age, the fundamental aspect of payments are changing rapidly. And so technology and innovation are changing how consumers shop with payment security, moving to a more proactive approach with biometrics. Consumers want convenience and simplicity along with safety and security. With the security enhancements implemented in the physical world, consumers want their digital transactions to remain as safe as their physical with little effort. We must embrace innovation and technology without leaving the door open for criminal exploitation. So we first started to see this use of biometrics for authentication purposes in general public with, fingerprint as a safer and simpler way to unlock a phone. Then in 2017, Apple introduced Face ID, and this quickly became adopted as a means to reduce the use of passwords. It's not just the consumers, right, who didn't like these passwords. Merchants, issuers, and regulators are all looking for alternatives for passwords and better ways to authenticate. We expect that biometric authentication will be used to secure anywhere over $2.5 trillion worth of mobile payment transactions by the year 2024, an increase of almost 1,000% from 2019. Over half of consumers want to authenticate different types of transaction, with the highest interest in sending money to friends, account access changes, and opening new accounts with existing banks. Biometric authentication will not just be a matter of a single modality, the choice between face, voice, fingerprint, even palm, but it will also it'll also lead us to this idea of the consumer preference and the consumer choice for allowing the end user to provide, not only the single modality of strength, but the choice and preference that they desire as consumers in different demographics continue to prioritize the use of biometrics differently. Now, while most experts can see eye to eye on the benefits of biometrics, the underlying architecture with which to implement biometrics is less clear. More specifically, whether a server or a device-centric architecture is more effective and secure. So I'd like to kind of touch on this a little bit further. Most organizations treat the smartphone, the tablet, or the PC that an individual is using as something you have. It's possession. In the pursuit of multi-factor solutions, so great strides have been made by the likes of standards like FIDO to transform the smart endpoints into trusted devices. They want to make these trust devices very similar to what we did with physical tokens that RSA and other providers provided to us to support enterprise-grade security. Protecting customer confidence and allowing the user to manage their own data is key. The greatest fear and damage to reputation is for people to believe that their personal identifying data has been exposed, especially since you can't, quote unquote, change your fingerprint, right? And Mastercard has products that support this device-based model, leveraging a FIDO compliant solution where the biometric template is collected, encrypted, and stored on the device, and all subsequent matching occurs locally on the device as well. Now, any biometric solution should have biometric templates that are encrypted at rest and in transit. This is best practice, regardless of whether a centralized model or an on-device model is being used. With the centralized or server model, the biometric template is enrolled, encrypted, and stored centrally on a server. Authentication is captured and sent to the central matching engine where it's processed and matched against the enrolled template stored centrally. Although there is a fear of exposure with the server model, the risk of direct exposure is minimized by the transformation of the biometric to its encrypted representation. An encrypted digital representation of a voice, face, your fingerprint, or any other modality is designed such that it cannot be used to identify a person, cannot be re-engineered back to its original raw data, and therefore cannot be used for attackers in any real strong or competent biometric deployment. So now we talk, in this area of privacy. So, we've talked a little bit about security, convenience, and now as we just kind of dig a little deeper into this idea of privacy, data privacy has become a hot topic, in the news thanks to failures in security and concerns about how companies are using our personal data. Facebook, for instance, faced scrutiny over its handling of consumer data both in the US and in the UK. Data privacy concerns are particularly paramount for companies in the financial and healthcare sectors, where banks and other financial institutions manage a large volume of sensitive information about their customers. And the breach of such data can have dire consequences. As we increasingly depend on the cloud, the servers, right, to store information and conduct financial transactions online, data privacy concerns continue to grow. Concerns around protecting consumer information even drove the European region to create new laws that require companies to implement tighter security to protect consumer information while guaranteeing consumers certain rights related to their personal data. In addition, as early as 2018, all of the 50 states in the US have now implemented their own data breach notification laws. With all of these protections in place, there's still a lack of understanding about data privacy laws among the general public. So again, statistically, 63% of Americans say they understand very little or nothing at all about the laws and regulations that are currently in place to protect their data privacy. People in different age groups have varying views on some key privacy and surveillance issues, where those that are 65 and older are less likely than those under 29 to feel that they have control over who can access their personal information, such as location, their purchase history, or even private conversations. In addition, 2/3 of adults over 65 say that fellow privacy news that as they will follow privacy news at least somewhat closely, compared to about 45% of those under 30 who would as well. When we talk about compliance, the Payment Card Industry Standards Security Council, the PCI SSC, has one of the most mature data security standards in existing surrounding payment card details. In essence, PCI says companies need to activate data protection when the payment card details are transmitted and when they are stored. It also lists requirements for policies, procedures, and infrastructures for the surrounding environments. When it comes to data collection beyond payment card details, specifically for data containing personally identifying information, or PII, from a consumer, there are other regulatory and regulations and laws companies need to adhere to. So when we talk about some of these regulations and legislations like GDPR, or the General Data Protection Regulations, which was implemented back in 2018, these guidelines outline the responsibilities of institutions doing business to keep citizens' information safe. GDPR specifically kind of flipped the data security model around so that the protection focused on the consumer. And as a result, fundamental changes were made in the way businesses collected and stored that personal data. At its core, GDPR says that data identifying consumers needs to be anonymized. The U.S. Congress also passed the GLBA, or the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, commonly known as the Financial Services Modernization Act of 1999, placing restrictions around how permissions for the institutions to share certain details with marketers. Federal agencies added additional guidelines years later, forcing banks and financial institutions to disclose the different ways customer information was being disclosed to those outside of the company. Additionally, the California Consumer Protection Act, the CCPA, which took legal precedence on January 1st of 2020, this year, stipulates that consumers need to be notified when a company or organization plans to sell or monetize the data for containing their PII, that personally identifying information. The CCPA recently granted the California Attorney General the authority to enforce this on July 1st, and it would give kind of more of the penalty phase, right, for what companies would risk if they weren't in compliance. And these violations have been noted to be in excess of $7,000 per violation. So they're really working to protect consumer information and data. So as we go further into areas of acceptance, retailers and merchants are especially vulnerable to data theft or exposures because they are typically the first point of contact for this consumer data. The first points of contact include points of sale, the websites, mobile applications, all have to manage in ingesting data, consuming it, and finally securing it. PSPs, or payment service providers, play a vital role in moving transactions from one place to another and are highly susceptible to data theft or compromise. PSPs handle payment card details for many reasons, from settlement, reconciliations, disputes, cross-selling goods and services, to offering conveniences for future purposes. We're looking at payments beyond cards, and over time, the payment flow will become transparent, but the requirement for our customers' trust is ubiquitous and requires a consistent strategy. As such, the key will be the framework of how we will be looking at a consistent strategy across all of the payment flows. And lastly, kind of accessibility. As in-store purchases have become more secure, fraud continues to increase online. And we ask ourselves why. Identity verification is a top challenge for both issuers and merchants. In fact, 50% of global login traffic is at risk for potential account takeover or credential misuse. And consumers are frustrated when they don't have the same seamless, secure experience at every interaction. There are complications to having all of this access to our personal information, as more devices are now storing our personal data and payment credentials. This brings a risk of exposing our data and identity if we don't secure the information. One way to reduce the possibility of payment card details and consumer information exposure from getting into the wrong hands is to not process or store the data. Just like, businesses who ask people not to use cash. This would, in that instance, reduce the likelihood of monetary loss due to robbery, right? But in very similar premise to our personal data, not processing or storing payment card details and consumer information means that businesses would have to change their business model. Since data is imperative to keeping businesses running and feeding the services that build in order to compete, The best course of action is to use the data on hand and collect even more data while taking the critical steps to ensure all of it is protected and kept private. So interesting quote, security and a seamless experience should never be mutually exclusive, right? Physical biometrics solve for both, helping us deliver greater trust in the digital payment ecosystem, particularly at a time when peace of mind is in short supply. This was a quote from one of our SVPs within Identity Solutions at Mastercard. And I start with this because as we've investigated it for many years, there's a trade-off between security and convenience, where more security meant less convenience at one point. Biometrics has changed that. More than 90% of users believe biometrics are more secure and more convenient than passwords, and they are willing to adopt biometrics to replace existing password-based authentication. By 2023, it's forecasted that nearly 40 billion transactions will be authenticated with biometrics, with a value of over $2 trillion. That is why better intelligence sharing and smarter decisioning are critical to enable genuine transactions to flow while trapping or blocking criminal activity. When it comes to biometric authentication, consumers want choice and the ability to select from a menu of what they consider fun, low friction, explicit biometrics, making day-to-day transactions and tasks seamless and secure, regardless of the environment, cultural, weather, or other factors. Using multiple biometrics as a form of authentication can also achieve higher biometric performance by creating more obstacles, right, for fraud and maintaining convenience. The verification of biometric data, liveness detection, and associated security processing are all keys to this innovation. Physical biometrics such as fingerprint, right, face, voice, or palm are being combined with technologies that recognize behavioral traits and associated devices to create this seamless, intelligent, and more secure method of authentication. Among future forward biometrics like heartbeat or pulse, authentication can be realized and can provide extremely high security measures. Since you can't easily reference samples like photographs of fingerprints for preventing this idea of spoofing for these types of models, the heartbeat, the pulse, those kinds of things, vein, these methods of authentication will increase, especially in fields requiring high security. And those that are dealing with consumers' personal data, such as financial or medical, all of this information and the way that we secure this information can be applied to the process of payments. A consumer authentication strategy is important, right? And how we determine trust with our audience, convenience, and ultimately choice are ways to consider the user experience with security at hand. So now, we've spent a lot of time on the digital transaction. I think, but I did want to mention, as I mentioned earlier, consumers want the same level of security and ease with both digital and physical transactions. It's been stated that 8 out of 10 transactions are still frequent face-to-face card purchases. Many consumers want the security and convenience of a product like a biometric card for those in-store experiences, similar to the digital world. So the biometric card, a little bit about it, it's deemed as the cleanest form of contactless. The biometric card has a lightweight enrollment process where the cardholder's fingerprint template that mathematical representation is enrolled on the card and stored directly within the secure element. It works with existing EMV terminals, so both contact and contactless, to perform biometric validation by just holding your thumb over the sensor while you either dip or tap your card. The fingerprint template never leaves the card, as the Mastercard app on the chip performs the verification of user. You also might add, does it need a battery? And the answer is no. The card draws enough power directly from the point of sale terminal to perform authentication. And that biometric success or failure is communicated back to the point of sale, similar to an offline PIN. The consumer benefits of security and convenience with the ability to use these cards for higher value payments in physical locations, even contactlessly and without a PIN, will further accelerate adoption of biometric payment cards without disrupting these point of sales. Now, the future of authentication shows different checkout experiences. A consistent process to enable trust across devices and people, all to perform different actions, including payments. The biometric only experience will be based on our current experiences, like what we see common in airport security. The experience will leverage that single registration approach, that server or network model, to provide a biometric match everywhere available, right? While being able to associate that biometrics now to a payment credential. Now, the first key is working with strong ID verification providers and initially closed loop environments to increase convenience while managing security and risk. The second key to these biometric only projects will be to find ways to create a second factor, similar to the physical card or even the FIDO challenge that we talked about, having two strong factors. The use of face or palm with additional PIN or other factors can create a more trusted payment authentication. Now, devices and IoTs, from voice recognition to voice authentication, devices will continue to facilitate commerce. As we explicitly authenticate the user at checkout, that authenticated challenge could be shared with the network for validation. Your whole home could process authentication on your behalf with behavioral analytics to reduce those automatic attempts, those bots, and any abnormal requests that could be initiated without your approval. And then we have those elements of this portable ID, this digital identification, where a reusable digital ID is managed by the user with their data on device, delivered via trust partners or trust providers, and accessed through a network of relying parties. The key here is that you would be able to leverage existing relationships with trust providers, your bank, for example, to verify your enrollment in other relying party services like travel. And the future is just endless here. So there's so many opportunities, and I hope that we have an opportunity to talk about those in some Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamila. There were some questions that came in while we were talking. I encourage the rest of the panelists and attendees to please continue to drop questions in the Slack channel. But to start, and bear with me because this is a long question, how do you see the use of biometrics in payments impacting compliance requirements for merchants worldwide? Already, the annual PCI DDS attestations is a significant cost. Do you see this reducing or increasing scope of the PCI audits required by the card brands? Will the card brands look to rely on existing privacy regulations like GDPR and CCPA, or add to the existing 12 requirement areas of PCI DSS?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I know today, as we continue to facilitate authentication of user, there are, two models when we talk about the ecosystem. There's that one where the issuer kind of has that traditional responsibility, especially within 3DS models of step-up authentication. And then there's the new model where they're trying to allow for merchants to also participate in how they authenticate these users, having this strong evidence of user authentication and being able to submit that as more of a delegated type of response. So as we move forward, the responsibility of that data, to the original part of that question, will continue, right? Because merchants now have relationship with consumers. They're biometrically authenticating them to enter into the app or to perform checkout services. But as we move more towards this one-click, this single authenticated type of transaction, you're going to have that data that's going to be available at the merchant level, being used as evidence for verification amongst the networks.
Great. And then there was a follow-up to that. Additionally, has Mastercard looked at the new PCI software security framework in relation to assurance for future capabilities?
Yeah, I can tell you that, there are definitely parts of our organization that are looking, proactively, and of course in real time with all of those standards. And so, as a network, it is the strong definition that we are always, compliant or adhering towards the guidelines that are being set. So from a payment ecosystem, definitely we're able to adjust within our security framework.
Great. And so Jamila, in your office, you're in the St. Louis area, is that correct? In the Fusion Center?
So
So,
I'm part of the Identity Solutions. A majority of our team is actually based out of New York, but yes, we have relationship to the center here in St. Louis.
very good. Okay, I'm gonna say, so what are you seeing with students coming in that are best prepared or worst prepared to contribute to your team?
I think some of the things that we're looking at is just the awareness of ecosystem, just really being a part of, what we're doing today in this digital space, because a lot of the traditional payment flows have evolved, as I mentioned earlier, from early days, but having an appetite for this fintech environment, having an appetite for technology in general, and then also having an appetite towards how we can facilitate this trusted ecosystem. Because right now, again, some of the future of technology not only stems from the point of sale, it's stemming from these opportunities to walk in and walk out and being authenticated, or it's the opportunity to perform authentication with these different channels of internet devices. And so, from a payments perspective, we focus in my area around identity types of solutions, but even in other areas of the organization, security, simplicity, and safety are key, elements of what Mastercard stands for. So anything that we can do to enforce technology and to have that technical mindset are things that we're always looking for in our candidates.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. As I've done with most of our speakers, because everybody in this room is a serious strategic partner, presenters in this room are serious strategic partners. I want to thank Mastercard for their relationship with CERIAS, for hiring a number of Boilermakers to come work for you, as well as the research that you have funded with our faculty and some of the projects that we've done more recently, specifically in the area of biometrics that we've worked on you with. So Thank
Yes.
you. Look forward to growing the relationship even further. And with that, I think we conclude this section. So Jamila, thank you very much to you personally for your time today. And we will reconvene in 15 minutes with our next talk. Please take a look at where that Slack channel is in preparation for our next talk.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.